A kind-hearted black waitress's simple act of helping an elderly man in the rain led to a series of events that would dramatically reshape her life. Denise Carter arrived at work that morning, soaked to the bone and 5 minutes late, only to be publicly fired by her ruthless manager. Unbeknownst to her, the stranger she had assisted the previous night was watching. The moment he stepped into that diner, every cruel word her manager had uttered would come back to haunt him. Before we delve deeper, please consider hitting that subscribe button. Your support means everything to us, and it fuels our ability to bring you more compelling stories. Now let's continue. The storm raged relentlessly, battering Denise's windshield as if determined to force her off the road. She gripped the steering wheel of her old white pickup truck, the wipers working furiously to maintain a semblance of visibility. The diner had closed late, and she was utterly exhausted, her gray uniform still bearing damp patches from a coffee spill hours earlier. All she craved was warmth and quiet. Then, she noticed it. A black luxury sedan parked askew on the roadside, its hazard lights blinking weakly through the torrential downpour. The hood was up, and steam rose in thin, desperate wisps. As Denise slowed down, her headlights illuminated the figure of an elderly white man standing beside the car. His coat was saturated, and he leaned against the fender for support. He had no umbrella, no apparent assistance, just a soaked suit and a weary expression as he stared into the rain. She hesitated momentarily. It was late, the kind of night that encouraged people to ignore the troubles of others. But she couldn't ignore the way his shoulders trembled, the way his fingers fumbled with a phone that clearly had no signal in that location. With a sigh, Denise pulled over and lowered her window halfway. The scent of wet asphalt and engine oil filled the truck's cab. "You okay out here?" she called, her voice cutting through the storm's fury. The man turned, startled, squinting through the rain. "My car is dead. No tow trucks are answering. I think I took a wrong turn." Denise reached over and unlocked the passenger door, leaning toward the window. "You'll freeze out here. Get in before you drown." He hesitated again, studying her, a stranger offering help on a deserted road. Then, he nodded, opened the door, and slid into the passenger seat, leaving a trail of water on the worn fabric. The heater barely functioned, but she turned it on anyway. Its hum filled the silence as they drove slowly away. His voice was quiet, but filled with gratitude. "You didn't have to stop." Denise shrugged. "Guess I did. Can't leave someone's granddad melting in the rain." That earned the faintest of laughs. He introduced himself as Henry Weston, explaining that he was driving back from a late meeting outside the city when the storm caught him, and his car subsequently failed. Denise listened without prying, focusing on driving, the headlights illuminating the rain-soaked trees and the steady rhythm of the downpour on the truck's roof. She took him to her neighborhood, a row of modest apartment buildings shadowed by flickering streetlights. Inside her small, one-room apartment, she handed him a towel and a warm cup of instant soup. The radiator clicked weakly. She offered him her only blanket, dismissing his protests. When he finally fell asleep on her couch, she sat quietly by the window, watching the rain gradually subside. Her reflection in the glass looked tired but at peace. She knew she had done the right thing. Before dawn, she left for work. The couch was empty, the blanket folded neatly. A note lay on the table. "Thank you for seeing me as a person." She smiled faintly, folded the note, slipped it into her pocket, and stepped back into the gray morning. The streets were slick, the air crisp. She had no idea that the man she'd helped would re-enter her life, and that his subsequent visit would change everything. The morning dragged on, gray and cold. Denise's shoes squeaked on the diner floor as she rushed through the door, 10 minutes late. Her hair was still damp, her breath coming in short gasps from her run up the hill. The aroma of frying bacon and cheap coffee hit her like a wall. Behind the counter, Steve Harlow was already barking orders, his sleeves rolled up, his voice loud enough for the customers to hear. "Carter, you think time bends for you?" His tone dripped with contempt. Denise caught her breath, her eyes lowered. "I'm sorry, sir." "Save it," he snapped. slamming a receipt pad on the counter. "We've got a packed morning, the owner's visiting, and you stroll in like you're doing us a favor." A few customers turned their heads. The young cook paused over the grill. The clatter of dishes subsided. The tension in the room was palpable. Denise tried again, her voice gentle and calm. "I had to help someone. An older man broke down in the storm. I couldn't just—" Steve cut her off with a dismissive wave. "You think good deeds pay rent? You're late. That's all that matters." He turned to the room, his voice rising. "If any of you want to show up late, too, maybe you can join her out the door." A few people chuckled under their breath. Others looked away, avoiding eye contact. Denise's chest tightened. "Please, Mr. Harlow. I've worked here 4 years. You know I don't." He pointed toward the door. "You're done. Hand over your apron. I don't need excuses. I need reliability." Silence descended. Even the fryer seemed to pause its bubbling. Denise untied her apron, her hands trembling, her jaw tight. She laid it carefully on the counter, refusing to let him see her break down. As she turned toward the door, a woman in a booth whispered to her friend, "That poor thing. She's the nicest one here." Denise walked out into the drizzle, the bell above the door jingling one last time. The rain was softer now, but it felt more painful than the night before. She pulled her coat tighter and kept walking. Behind her, inside the diner, Steve smirked and straightened his tie. "Perfect timing," he muttered. "Owner's finally coming today. Last thing I need is charity cases making the place look sloppy." Outside, Denise stopped at the corner, her reflection faint in a puddle at her feet. She knew she had done the right thing. She was certain of it. But right didn't pay the bills. She didn't notice the black sedan slowly rolling past the diner, its tinted window lowering just slightly. Inside, Henry Weston watched her walk away, his face unreadable, the same note she had given him resting on the passenger seat beside him. He adjusted his tie, glanced back at the diner sign flickering in the rain, and said softly to himself, "So, this is where she works." He stepped on the gas. What happened next would rewrite both their lives. By noon, the diner was buzzing with energy. The rain had stopped, and sunlight streamed through the windows. The aroma of coffee and fresh pie filled the air. Steve Harlow stood by the counter, straightening napkin holders for the 5th time. He was restless, his nerves hidden behind a facade of false confidence. The staff whispered excitedly. No one had ever met the elusive owner. And today was the day. At precisely 12:30, the door opened. The bell chimed once. A tall, silver-haired man stepped inside, dressed in a dark, tailored coat, polished shoes, and an aura of composure that silenced the entire room. His presence was calm yet commanding, the kind that made people stand a little straighter without even realizing it. The cook paused mid-turn at the grill. A waitress froze with a coffee pot half-raised. Steve hurried forward, a salesman's smile plastered on his face. "Mr. Weston." "Welcome, sir," Steve said, his voice unnaturally high with forced warmth. "Everything's running perfectly clean, efficient, just as you'd want it." Henry Weston scanned the diner. His eyes moved over the booths, the counter, the polished chrome, the staff trying their best not to stare. But when he noticed the empty corner where Denise used to work, his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Where's the young woman from last night?" he asked, his voice even. Steve blinked, momentarily taken aback. "I'm sorry, sir?" "Denise Carter," Weston repeated. "The waitress who worked here yesterday morning." The manager forced a laugh. "Oh, her. I had to let her go. I'm afraid. Always late. Poor attitude. Not the kind of image you'd want for your business." Weston's expression remained unchanged, but the silence that followed cut through the chatter like a knife. He turned toward the cook. "Is that true?" The cook looked down at his shoes, avoiding eye contact. "No, sir. Denise was the best we had." Steve's smile faltered. "People like to exaggerate. I run a tight ship here." Weston stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "You fired her this morning?" "Yes, sir. For cause." Weston nodded slowly. Then he said, "Call her back." Immediately, the color drained from Steve's face. "Sir, that won't be necessary." I said, "Call her back," Weston repeated, his voice firm. The room fell deathly quiet. 5 minutes later, the bell above the door chimed again. Denise stepped inside, still in her wrinkled uniform. A look of confusion etched on her face. Every head turned as she walked in, unsure why she had been summoned. Weston's eyes softened when he saw her. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice steady but warm. "You helped me last night when no one else would. You didn't know who I was, and you didn't care. You just saw a person who needed help." Whispers rippled through the diner. The cook dropped his spatula. The waitress gasped. Weston continued, his voice ringing with authority. "You showed me what this place should represent, so I'm making it official. Denise Carter is reinstated as co-manager, effective immediately." Steve's jaw dropped open. "You can't be serious." "I'm very serious," Weston interrupted. "You wanted to impress me, Mr. Harlow. Congratulations. You just did the wrong way." The staff erupted in quiet applause, relief flooding the room. Denise stood speechless, tears welling in her eyes. Weston smiled faintly. "You gave me kindness in the rain. I intend to return it with respect." The bell above the door jingled again as new customers walked in, unaware that they were stepping into a diner that had just been transformed forever. Weeks later, the diner was thriving. The mornings buzzed with regulars, the coffee flowed freely, and laughter echoed in the booths once more. Under Denise's quiet but effective leadership, things ran more smoothly than ever before. Tips increased, customers lingered longer, and Weston's visits became less about oversight and more about pride. But not everyone shared in that pride. Steve Harlow's smile had become hollow. He now worked the register, no longer the boss, but just another employee answering to the woman he had once humiliated. Each time she passed by, polite and unbothered, something dark simmered beneath his outwardly calm expression. He stayed late after hours, pacing the kitchen and muttering to himself. Then came the missing cash. At first, it was small amounts, $50 here, $70 there. Denise discovered it during a late-night count. She checked twice, then 3 times, ensuring there were no mistakes. She didn't accuse anyone, but a deep sense of worry settled in her gut. When it happened again, she went straight to Weston. "I've balanced every register myself," she said. "It's deliberate. Someone's trying to make it look like I'm stealing." Weston studied her face, his expression serious. "Do you have any guesses?" "None I can prove," she admitted. He nodded thoughtfully. "Then we'll find proof." That evening, hidden cameras were installed near the counters. Weston brought in a quiet, unassuming man, a private investigator. No one in the diner was aware of this except for him and Denise. Days passed. Denise worked as usual, smiling through her unease. Steve kept to himself, but his eyes lingered too long on the register she used. Then, one Tuesday night, as the rain returned outside, the camera captured it all. Steve waited until Denise left early to handle a delivery. He opened her register, pulled out a stack of bills, and replaced her count slip with one of his own. He even smiled, whispering, "Let's see you talk your way out of this." The next morning, Weston called a full staff meeting. Everyone gathered around the counter, confused. The investigator placed a small laptop on the table and pressed play. The footage rolled, the silence in the room becoming almost unbearable. Steve's hand, the money, his smug smirk. It was all there. He went pale. "That's edited," he shouted, desperation in his voice. "She's setting me up." Denise didn't move, her expression unwavering. Weston's voice cut through the noise, calm but cold. "You framed the one person who saved me. You tried to ruin her reputation in my business. I built this place on trust and you allowed it to rot." 2 police officers stepped in quietly. The handcuffs clicked into place before Steve could utter another word. He shouted curses as they led him away, but no one looked up. The rest of the day, the diner remained oddly quiet. Denise worked her shift as usual, polite but distant. When Weston approached her later that night, he said softly, "You handled it with grace. Most people would have screamed." She smiled faintly. "I learned something that night in the rain. Some storms you stand through, others pass on their own." The neon sign flickered against the wet glass outside. This time, its reflection looked clearer somehow. 6 months later, the diner was unrecognizable compared to the place Denise had been fired from. The windows gleamed, and a new sign above the door read, "Rainy Day Diner." Every seat filled. People came not just for the food, but for the story, the one about a waitress who helped a stranger and changed both their lives. Inside, the air was warm, filled with laughter and the aroma of fresh coffee. Denise moved effortlessly through the room, clipboard in hand, offering a genuine smile to everyone she passed. The staff worked smoothly under her direction, proud to be part of something built on respect rather than fear. Weston sat in his usual corner booth, quietly watching her work. The press had written about her months ago, calling her the heart behind the diner's rebirth. When a local reporter asked what had prompted him to give her half ownership, he had simply replied, "She gave me kindness when she had nothing. That's worth more than profit." That night, he stood up and called for everyone's attention. "We built this place on compassion," he announced, his voice filled with emotion. "Denise reminded us what that means. Today I'm making it official. She's not just co-manager anymore. She's my partner." The staff erupted in thunderous applause. Denise covered her face for a moment, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. Weston handed her an envelope containing legal papers confirming the full partnership. "You've earned every bit of this," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. Later, as the lights dimmed and the last customers departed, Denise stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. Across the street, under the neon glow of a car wash sign, a familiar figure scrubbed a windshield. It was Steve Harlow, his shoulders hunched, his uniform damp from the mist. For a long moment, she simply observed him, her expression unreadable. Then, she walked across the street, her steps calm and deliberate. He froze as she stopped beside him, his eyes wide with surprise. Without a word, she handed him a sealed envelope. "What's this?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Your name's on it," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "Open it when you're ready." She turned and walked away, leaving him standing there in the rain. When he finally tore open the envelope, he found a small check made out to a local charity and a donation receipt bearing his name. Underneath it was a handwritten note. "Everyone deserves a second chance. I had mine." Back at the diner, Denise flipped the sign from closed to open. The morning light streamed through the glass, reflecting off the polished counter. She tied her apron, her movements calm and assured. The first customer walked in, shaking off the rain from his coat. Denise smiled softly. "Morning," she greeted him warmly. "Welcome to Rainy Day Diner, where kindness is always on the menu."